Hi, Dave here at AlbionVC, and today I have the pleasure of chatting with Malcolm Finlay and Adrien Desjardins, co-founders of Echopoint Medical. Malcolm and Adrien, you founded Echopoint in 2018, but your story starts a few years before that. We first met, I think, in 2016 when we provided some POC funding, and then we led your seed round in, I think, 2018, 2019, just after you founded the business, and we're now participating in your Series A. So it'd be great if you could start with just introducing yourselves and what Echopoint does.
Thanks very much, Dave. My name is Malcolm Finlay. I'm a consultant cardiologist at Bart's Heart Centre and also a senior lecturer at UCL. And we founded the business in 2018. I've worked with Adrien here for many years. Adrien.
Thank you, Dave. Thanks for the opportunity. I'm Adrien Desjardins. I'm the Chief Technology Officer at Echopoint, and I also serve as a Professor of Biomedical Engineering at UCL.
Great. And would you tell us a little bit about the technology that Echopoint's developing and the problem it is that you're solving?
Sure. So Echopoint is a medtech startup that we founded in the UK, and our vision as a whole was to transform minimally invasive surgical procedures. And this transformation is based on a very broad technology platform that we've developed with a combination of fiber optic sensing and custom algorithms.
Yeah, one of the great things that we had was working with both a sort of deep tech background and the clinical background. We decided to address a major problem in cardiovascular disease, which is the disease of the tiny blood vessels of the heart, microvascular disease. And that's a problem which has been overlooked because it's so hard to measure when patients come in for minimally invasive surgery. And so patients often get falsely reassured and not treated, and they get discharged and they enter this very costly cycle of further scans and tests and actually never finding a result. So at Echopoint, we're making a device that fits in the standard minimally invasive surgical workflow, which can tell the doctors at a touch of a button whether the patient has microvascular disease or not, and also gives them a huge amount of other metrics which are useful for decision making during surgery.
Amazing. And one of the core strengths of Echopoint is the different skill sets that you both bring. So Adrien, you're a professor in the engineering faculty at UCL, and Malcolm, you're a leading cardiologist. You've been working together for over a decade now, I think. How did you meet? What brought you together, and how did that story all start?
Sure.
Well, here's your recollection. I'll give you mine.
There is something about that recollection. We were in very sleep-deprived days, and depending on the story of the day, we're still trying to remember what exactly happened, but somehow we found ourselves in a cafe talking about what we could do in this interface that brings together fiber optic sensing and cardiology. And
there were some problems that I had, which your technology immediately chimed with. And not only that, but we seem to kind of have a drive to make things actually better and not just keep things in the publication academic sphere.
Yeah, I think that's exactly it, because we recognize that there is a huge technology solution space, but one thing that we had in common was this interest in developing solutions that were fully compatible with current clinical workflow. We wanted this technology essentially to disappear and for the solution to be what shines forward. So it was that drive that I think brought us together to think we could do something exciting.
Yeah, and then we sort of built up the scientific background and the basis of it, which went through many iterations, as you alluded to, and eventually came out in the technology we brought into Echopoint.
Yeah, so just going back to that time. So when we first met, you'd already filed some IP. You'd already actually made headlines. I remember you had something in the Evening Standard where you'd been doing some sensing, I think, for transeptal punctures. And I remember meeting you and realizing, there's a huge breadth of capabilities that the technology you were developing had. Can you tell me a little bit about how you went about focusing down and deciding on where you were going to sort of point the technology at and which use case you were going to go after?
Sure. Well, I think the first thing that we recognized is that we needed some diversity in thinking. We had been working very closely together from clinical and technical angles, but we needed some experience from the investment side. We needed to bounce ideas off of people who have seen technologies come to market very successfully. And so in this respect, the UCL Technology Fund was transformative for us, and it allowed us to situate ourselves within this broader network of super engaged, switched on people who could point us to questions that we hadn't even considered before.
Yeah, that sort of, I remember when we first met you, Dave, one of the first things that came out was this question, right, we're going to form a business here, who pays? And that is something that as a clinician, as an academic, it's another world that you really have to grasp before you want to go to something successful. So we did some pretty in-depth market analysis initially, like where should this technology best lie? Where is our primary focus going to be and where we're going to aim our efforts initially? So we have this big opportunity, but it's actually getting that first lead application really netted down and sorted out, which I think that focus that UCL Tech Fund, you personally, and the other members of the team that we've interacted with really brought that into sharp perspective, and I think we benefited hugely from that and continue to do so.
Great, and that was when we did the proof of concept funding, which was the loan to the university and allowed you to go out and sort of have the freedom and time to sort of do all of that exploration, I think.
That's exactly it. So that was the launch pad for the company, and it's when we started thinking very seriously, with tremendous guidance from the UCL Tech Fund, about how to hire into that company, specifically a CEO, executive chair, who could lead us into the next phase.
Yeah, we also took lots of other expertise. We were able then to access people and discuss with them with some weight behind us. This is going to be a real thing, and so we were able to take a wider breadth of opinion as well, and talk to people outside of the company, outside of the university, in a way that we hadn't, frankly, been able to before.
Great. And Adrien, you just alluded to bringing in an exec chair. So Anthony Adele joined the business roughly around 2018, I think, as well. What was that process like, going and finding him? What did you learn through that? How would you describe that now?
Yeah, I mean, that was a exciting process. We got to, for the first time as a clinician and founder, be interviewing people who are ultimately going to be my boss, I guess, in Echopoint. We met a lot of very capable people. You also got a real sense for the need of and the rarity of great expertise in this space. I mean, we did an extensive executive search, and then it's through word of mouth that Anthony popped up. But I think if we weren't doing a formal search, then that word of mouth wouldn't have happened. So we met Anthony. We also met some other people who I've actually formed other relationships with over the course of the years since. So it was a great process directly, specifically for finding the exec chair for Echopoint, but then more broadly, for example, we met Nice really in that process as well. He's become our chief of operations. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so it was a really helpful process to build out more than just
the one job we were looking for. Yeah. We met other people, and Bobby Willis as well still he's now in one of the major medtech companies. So we've got someone who we looked for in Echopoint, who is actually now in a position in one of the major medtech. So we've got conversation.
And that very has to have.
Yeah. For sure.
So looking back on those early days, if you were giving advice to other founders who were thinking about starting a business from an academic setting or an IP-rich setting, what would be the key bits of advice that you'd like to pass on to them?
Sure. So how long do we have? I would say, as a starting point, it's hard to overstate the importance of being hands-on with engaging potential end users. And in our case, and in my case specifically, this involved going to see a lot of clinical procedures and to put myself out of my comfort zone. I asked a lot of silly questions, but I wanted to see what problems clinicians were experiencing, how our potential solutions might integrate. And so I think that stands out as one of the formative experiences in those early days that I would recommend to others.
Yeah, the other thing that I guess I've already mentioned that I really learned from that initial process is you've got to think about the whole journey. You may have an amazing piece of tech, but then if you can't manufacture it, if there's no hope of making it at scale, if the technology is never going to work beyond a certain point in its current form, or if it's got no real market value, then this route is not the right one for you, and you could best off spending your efforts in another way. So actually understanding that's part of the process initially, I think is a huge benefit, and saves time and effort and pain in the long run.
Right. I would add one more thing, which is I think one aspect that we both considered from the beginning is that diversity in the organization is hugely beneficial and essential, and that diversity can take on many forms. Getting back to your point about bringing in a CEO, I think we both appreciated that we needed someone who thinks differently than we do, who has experience with building businesses, who has experiences with raising capital, and it was a tricky balance, because you want to find someone who brings in that diversity, but you also want to find someone who very much resonates on a personal level, with whom we're going to spend a lot of time. And again, thinking about the UCL Tech Fund and the transformative nature of that, that fund was key to bring us in contact with people who could bring to bear that need for diversity in the company.
I agree, 100%.
Great. And so you focused down and chose your application area of microvascular disease and sensing for flow, which is the metric that you're using. So what happened then? So you formed the business, and then what's happened between then and where are you now?
Okay, so after the hangovers went from the champagne, faded off, then we were faced with trying to build a medtech device in the midst of an ongoing pandemic, right? So the first thing was, I think from my point of view, was seeing the engineering team pull the innovations from the university into the company. So how that process took a long time, and challenges were unexpected, but through grit and determination and basically sheer willpower at some points, things were overcome. And we went from sensors which had issues initially to through generations of supplier issues and all the things that I think when you speak to founders who've gone through that, it's in common, but you don't believe it's going to happen. I mean, I thought, hold on, this will be 3 months and then we'll be there. But it was, the pain. But we got there. And then it was a point of everything started to open up. Then how do we get this into patients? And how do we then prove that this is actually going to be something that's going to be worth taking on beyond the seed into Series A and beyond?
And you did get it into patients. So you've done your first 10 patients now at Bath Hospital, just up the road. I heard from you that that trial, that first 10 patient trial, was covered by the Financial Times, and subsequent to that, you got letters from people who were suffering from microvascular disease, undiagnosed, and they were desperate to get this technology out there. How does it feel to you to be tackling such an important problem and having it validated in such a personal and urgent way?
Right. In short, it's hugely inspirational for the engineering team. Malcolm, what did you think?
Yeah, I mean, we set out on this journey to try and do that, right? To try and actually help people. And I think we've given the inspiration for patients that we can do this. And that letter saying, please can I come into your trial because I've got this problem and no one's been able to prove that to me yet. So that gives a boost to us, and the resonation of that through the organization, even though we saw 10 patients in our study, but that has a bigger impact. Just that first in human study happening in Bath, happening in London, means that people all around London, all around the UK start to think about that. That raises up a couple of notches of this disease condition. So, okay, so we're doing a thing for a business to make a great product, but the resonance of even doing it and going there is a bigger impact than we could, than I expected, really.
So you've seen great results. We got fantastic results from those trials, able to, for the first time ever on the push of a button, diagnose microvascular disease. It must be dead easy to raise finance and funding for businesses like this, right?
Well, it's funny that you say that. It's actually been a huge shift in mindset, because for so many months throughout the seed phase, we have been laser focused on bringing to market this particular solution, for bringing this to fruition in the first in human study. And the Series A fundraising process essentially forced us in a very good way to think much broader than that, to think big and think about the journey that lies ahead. And it's been inspirational in that way, but also I think it's been a time when the teams very much come together, and I think, Malcolm, as you would say as well, we've been thinking about the broader set of clinical challenges that lie ahead.
Yeah, I mean, the story about where we have been and where we're going really shifted with the completion of that clinical trial. So talking to people, raising money when we've got all these current buzzwords or buzzwords going through over the time, like we had crypto and then that all disappeared, now AI, and that's going to, then people are going to realize how expensive that is. When you've got something which is, totally steady, more sort of classical investment opportunity in medtech, which will be a disease-changing device and change the lives of people. That's often slightly harder to pitch to people who have been hearing all about crypto opportunities. So I think we have had to adjust the way we play this and the story we're telling. And actually, we're starting from a different place now. I think we've become much more successful. So we're delighted that the Series A looks like we'll be through and because what we really want is to make this business a great success.
What have you learnt about working with VCs, both pitching to them and then having them on your board and interacting with them? What advice would you give other people? What have you learnt personally through that process?
Well, it's great because we have these fireside chats. As one bonus.
You're fired.
Sadly, not in the office for safety reasons.
But I would say it's been a huge pleasure to work together, and we've also been amazingly impressed with how much we can learn at an early stage through engagement this way. This is far more than just capital in. This is about the people. This is about the network. And so I would suggest for those who are coming up through this pipeline to think about venture capital community that way, that they're joining a community of people that will become part of their journey.
Yeah, obviously close your ears here, but for other founders, I mean, the VCs that I've met have been just incredibly impressive people who've almost, everyone I meet seems to have some bonkersly impressive backstory, and who are able to see numerous different technologies and the problems hitting numerous different fields and bring that advice to bear very quickly. And with that, they're often, mainly, so far as I've met, seem to be pretty decent people. So quite good fun as well to hang out with. So if there's that opportunity as well, I wouldn't go for your investor just because they're good fun. But there's a bit of both there.
Excellent. And during this process, when you've been taking the business through first development and then into humans for the first time, you've both retained positions elsewhere. So Adrien, you're a professor at UCL. Malcolm, you're a practicing cardiologist. How do you juggle being in a fast-moving startup and all of the energy and effort that I see you guys putting in every day with all your commitments elsewhere? How do you make that work?
Yeah, if I just... so, number one, you've got to not value sleep so much. So having done some years as a junior doctor, I kind of know how that is. But seriously, people at Barts and at QMUL have been extremely generous to me for allowing me the latitude and the flexibility to put energy into Echopoint Medical, and then when things are quiet in the startup, to pay it back within the health service. And that balance has been something which I don't think I could have done this to the extent I have done without. I'm sure that you've got similar experience through UCL.
Right. It's been a process that we didn't really have a manual for at the beginning. So we spoke with as many people as we could about this, but every situation is a little bit different. UCL has also been very supportive of the process, as have the Royal Academy of Engineering, who provided very generously a chair to support this interaction between Echopoint and UCL. Overall, I think there was a kind of transition in my particular research group at UCL, where initially there was this question mark: what is this new entity that we're creating? And is this going to be essentially an academic lab in another form? And it was recognized quite quickly that Echopoint is an entirely new organization, and it's focused on a different set of problems. We're starting with a technology that's largely been proven in the laboratory, and we're tackling regulatory challenges, we're tackling refinement of medical device design. And so for the team at UCL, it was, I think, really interesting and useful to see how technologies can be brought to market that way, and how actually the initial part of the journey in academia is only a small part of the larger picture to bring this successfully to market.
And just focusing then on UCL and the environment there, does it help having a funder embedded in the university? Does that make a difference to entrepreneurs like you?
It's been hugely useful having a funder embedded. It's been useful from many perspectives. I'll give you a specific example. So Echopoint was venture backed in its seed phase. It was also backed by grants from Innovate UK, and those grants are ones that we spent a lot of time and energy writing in the early days, and academia prepares us for pitching ideas, for trying to write effectively, but I think it also prepares us for acknowledging when we are missing a certain element. And one of the core elements that we were missing in those early grant writing days was the venture capital background that could point us towards what's needed to raise capital, not just for this round, but for future rounds. And so I would say that process of embedding the technology fund within the university brought a kind of coherence. It made that process holistic, and it allowed us to write a complete grant application.
Great. And yeah, I remember you won quite a lot of grant money from Innovate UK through, I think, the Investor Partnership Scheme was one, and was it Biomedical Catalyst as well? You won?
Did. Yeah. And thank you for all your support with the Investor Partnership Scheme. That was critical.
It's a great scheme, one that AlbionVC is very happy to be on, because it allows us to, bring that extra non-dilutive funding into early stage opportunities, which can be transformational, I think, as you guys found.
We certainly did.
It made a huge difference to the length of the journey you could go on at seed, and took you all the way through your process in human. Exactly. Which is, and now as you've been raising your Series A, that's a transformational thing. So really a great scheme from Innovate UK, and one that we're really proud and happy to be on. Malcolm, you're a light aircraft pilot in your spare time, and I've had the pleasure of a trip with you in your plane.
The pleasure is all mine.
There was a moment on that trip where we had to make an emergency landing, so there was a fault with the plane just after takeoff, which was very exciting. But you adapted very quickly on the fly, and that seems like it's a skill which is pretty important in startups. How have you sort of had to adapt through the last 3 years in that sort of rapid way that you demonstrated? To my pleasure, as we landed safely, how have you brought those skills to bear in your startup?
Yeah, so that was a memorable moment, David. I think you're very kind to say it was a plane fault, but most of these things are a combination of pilot error and aircraft. But we did land safely, and you did say what are those flashing lights and fire engines for? That's right. The startup process has thrown up loads of unexpected bumps in the road, right? Otherwise, everyone would do it. Otherwise, it'd be straightforward. I think with us, we had a particular benefit of starting in 2019. So we got COVID to smash us right through in the early stage of our engineering. And so the adaptation between the team, essentially going fully remote for a period of time, and then going back to using the office and lab space for very specific problems during those 2020, 2021 periods, and then bringing back in the team back into the office in 21. That was a particular challenge I think we faced, and actually Adrien and Anthony particularly, credit to them, because I got kind of whisked away during that.
You were doing the Nightingale.
I did the Nightingale and intensive care at Royal London and the second wave and so on. So that really took it out of me, but we managed to keep things together and bring it back together as things calmed down.
And likewise, you were having to figure out how to teach at a university when you couldn't see your students and all other things. So hugely complicated time, and incredible that through that you're still able to build a device which is given the green light by the MHRA to be used in clinic.
Yes, exactly. I'd like to think that brought us together in ways, and now we're taking that whole experience and thinking about how we use it as a kind of springboard to create the next phase where we'll be in a new location.
And as you go through those ups and downs in a startup, how important is your relationship with your board and your stakeholders, your investors, other people? How did you manage it to make it work well?
Well, other than trying to kill them.
Well, yeah, other than taking them up. Yeah, right, yes.
I mean, just that one-on-one sort of personal relationship that I think you allude to has been super important, both with yourself and the other board members. It's meant that there have been discussions and advice that can be had, and ways of, maneuvering the way we're going to tackle something, so people remain aligned. I think keeping those telephone calls open, keeping those lines of communication open, so everyone can be aligned, and make sure that when we're having a formal appraisal at the board meeting, then people know what's going on. There's not going to be a surprise. I think having that interpersonal relationship is critical. It's critical to have that. So the board meetings run smoothly, on time, and decisions are made which are the right decisions that everyone is actually on board with, not just giving lip service to.
Yeah, absolutely. And now you're about to close the Series A, and looking forward to the future. What's next for Echopoint? What do the next couple of years hold?
Right. Well, it's hugely exciting, and I guess we can answer that in different ways. So in terms of bricks and mortar right here in London, we've recently secured a new location in Shoreditch. We're excited about that. More broadly speaking, we're going to be moving into very large markets, and we're in the process of mapping out how to do that. So the experience that Anthony O'Dell brings to this process is clearly evident, and we're learning a lot from him. It's also interesting, with the CTO hat firmly on here, to consider how to scale up in terms of other elements of our technology platform. So we recognize that this vision that we started with, namely transforming minimally invasive procedures, has a number of different elements to it. It has different types of sensors, it has different clinical applications, and one of the aspects that we'll look to you for guidance for is essentially how to bring in those different elements of the technology platform in a way that doesn't overwhelm in the post-funding period, but also allows us to bring to fruition these innovations.
Yeah, I mean, from my point of view, I think the first 6 months in our new place is going to be really hardcore engineering work. So I am expecting to
sit back
enjoying. But then we'll have our fully functional go-to-market device, and that will be the one we're going to go to America with. And so we'll go to America, where the highest reimbursement rates, the biggest apparent need initially, and prove it in the early US FDA, through the FDA, and to the 510K route.
Right. And this is where your standing as a cardiologist really helps, because you're able to build up networks of key opinion leader doctors and others in the US ready to be the first adopters.
Yeah, I'd hope so. I mean, there is one thing about being a clinician. There's that sort of, it's not really a clinician's club, but it does mean that I can discuss with people and bring people in without it being a sort of formal industry, clinician relationship. I can speak to people as a peer in the cath lab. It's an environment that I'm used to working in every day, of course, and so that does bring a certain cachet.
And looking sort of 5 years down the line now, Echopoint's been hugely successful. What does it look like for you personally, and for the company, and for patients?
Yeah, wow, that's a really fun idea. So I think in 5 years' time, my vision is that we're in the market. Echopoint is going out into all geographies. We will be on certainly an uptick. There will be more funding in the business, which will be growth funding to get people to actually market and sell the device. There are numerous routes that we could be in that point. And I think at that point, we'll also have made substantial progress on the other products that Adrien's pointing to. So not just progress in the scientific sense, but progress in developing them towards the market. So I think that's going to be enormously exciting to have a London-based spin-out company startup has been on this journey from UCL through the tech funds, through the Series A and so on, to be a world leader in minimally invasive surgical guidance.
Cool. And looking backwards, right to the start of the journey, if you go back and speak to Adrien and Malcolm in their sort of 10 years more youthful state.
What do you say?
What?
Get more sleep.
Apart from the sort of the sleep advice, is there anything else that you would? What one piece of advice would you go back and tell yourselves to make this journey smoother, or to make sure that you are as successful as you have been?
Yeah, it would be great to go back in time in that way. This brings up a whole new Back to the Future kind of play that we could make possible. But I think it's actually difficult because right now we have so many aspects of this journey that have pointed us to specific lessons, but many of these need to be lived in order to be fully appreciated. And we both have kids, and I think we both have this experience at home of trying to pass on advice, and sometimes that process is met with a certain resistance. And so I wonder if we were to go back in time and say, actually, spend a little more time focused on this aspect of the engineering, it might be difficult. In the end, when it comes down to launching a spinout, it's a matter of riding that wave of excitement and not so much looking at all the statistics that might determine probabilistically whether something is successful or not. I think it's a matter of believing in the solution and listening very closely to those who are experienced with investing, those who have been down this journey before, and just going for it.
Yeah, I would just echo that hugely, that one can try and understand things and hear what other people have to say and other people's experiences are, but there's nothing like trying to actually do it and really feeling the pain. Personally, advice to me, I'd say, just be a little bit more accepting of the bumps in the road, be a little bit more conscious that this isn't going to just disappear smoothly, and try and keep as humble as you can be, because, looking back, I realized that, hold on, I was sure I was right on so many aspects, and there may have been some elements that were right there, or wrong there, but certainly I shouldn't have been certain that I was right. There was more, having the voices at the table. I wish they didn't have to, shout me down to make the right decision for the company.
Well, it's been an absolute pleasure to share the last 7 years of the journey with you, and I'm looking forward to sharing the next 5, 6, 7 years too. It's been great.
Likewise. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much for coming up, David. Cheers.